My name is Kasha Clark, and my wedding day was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. I was sure my family would be there for me ever since I was a child. They always reminded me that family sticks together and shows up for every important moment: birthdays, graduations, even the smallest wins. That morning, when my phone buzzed with a text from my dad, I smiled, thinking it would be congratulations, or at least a call to say they were on their way. Instead, it read the whole family's busy send pics. No warmth, no emojis, just a cold line that felt like a slap in the face. I waited for a follow-up to soften the blow, but nothing came. I tried to brush it off, telling myself they'd show up later. My fiancé noticed my forced smile, but didn't push. By noon, with no word from them, I opened Instagram to distract myself, and my heart sank. There they were, my parents, my brother, his wife, and a few cousins laughing together on a Miami Beach, surfboards propped in the sand. The caption read, "A perfect family day." Dozens of photos showed them riding waves, clinking drinks, and enjoying the day without a care in the world, not a single mention of my wedding. They had planned this trip weeks ago, choosing my brother's company over mine on the day I needed them most. I left a comment on the post with just one word: congrats. My hand shook, but my mind was clear about what I would do next. That night, I picked up my phone and made a call. 7 a.m. The next morning, my screen lit up with 32 missed calls. If it were your wedding day and your family skipped it to go on a vacation, ignoring you completely as if you didn't exist, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to know. That call I made from the hotel room wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was to Taylor, my friend since college, a meticulous accountant who could spot a discrepancy from a mile away. I needed her to dive into something that had been gnawing at me for weeks. My brother had been dodging questions about the startup. I'd bankrolled a company organizing high-end yacht events in Miami. His grand plan to woo wealthy tourists and local elites. I'd trusted him, funneled over $200,000 into it over 2 years, believing his promises that it was on the verge of profitability. But his vague updates, his habit of sidestepping when I asked for financial reports, had started to raise red flags. After their stunt at my wedding, I knew something was off, something bigger than a missed family event. Taylor got to work immediately. By midnight, she was deep into the shared accounts I'd set up for the startup. I sat on the hotel bed, my laptop screen casting a dim glow as she pulled up the numbers. The books were a mess. Over $80,000 had disappeared under miscellaneous expenses in the past 6 months. No receipts, no contracts, just murky labels like event supplies or consulting fees. Then she found a transaction that made my pulse spike: a $25,000 transfer to a luxury car dealership dated a month ago. Another $12,000 went to a high-end boutique for custom yacht gear, designer sunglasses, a Rolex things no startup needed. My money earned through years of coding, late nights as a software developer, had been spent on his Porsche and a wardrobe to play the part of a Miami big shot. I didn't yell or break down. A cold clarity settled over me like the betrayal had sharpened my focus. My brother hadn't just skipped my wedding. He'd been draining my investment to fuel his ego. I told Taylor to lock his access to the accounts. She moved fast, updating passwords and cutting off his permissions before he could touch another dollar. By 3 a.m., the funds were frozen, but I wasn't stopping there. I needed to know the full scope of his deception. The next morning, Taylor emailed me a folder of screenshots, more unauthorized transfers, some as recent as last week. One caught my eye: a $6,000 payment to a marketing agency with no online presence. I Googled it, found a bare-bones website with generic stock images and no contact info. It was a front, a sham to siphon cash. My brother wasn't just sloppy. He was deliberate scheming behind my back. I reached out to Morgan, his colleague at the startup, someone I'd met during a pitch last year. She'd always seemed honest, annoyed by his flashy demeanor. When I asked if she'd noticed anything strange, she didn't hold back. She'd seen him pull up in that Porsche, boasting about big investors who never materialized. She'd caught him promising vendors payments the company couldn't cover. Morgan had access to the expense logs and backed up Taylor's findings he'd been skimming funds for months, funneling money into personal purchases while the startup bled dry. She sent me a detailed spreadsheet, every line a confirmation of his betrayal. I leaned back, the weight of it sinking in. My brother had used my trust to prop up his image, and my parents had enabled him, always treating him like the star of the family, while I quietly covered their expenses. They'd let him slide just as they'd let him ditch my wedding for a day of posing on a Miami beach. I wasn't going to let this pass. Locking the accounts was only the first move. I needed to dismantle his facade, expose him where it would sting the most. That afternoon, I called Taylor again, laying out the next steps. She cautioned that things could get ugly, but I was past caring. The morning after I locked Brandon's access to the startup funds, my phone rang before I'd even finished my coffee. It was Brandon, his voice sharp with panic, not bothering to hide his frustration. "What the hell did you do to the accounts?" He snapped no hello, no pretense. "I can't get in and the bank's saying there's an issue. Unlock it now. Not a word about my wedding. Not a hint of guilt for ditching me to play Miami Beach King. Just a demand like I owed him my savings." I leaned back in my chair, my grip tightening on the phone. "The accounts are locked because I locked them," I said, keeping my tone steady. "I know what you've been doing with my money." He laughed a forced, nervous sound. "You're overreacting," he said. "The business needs that cash. Don't turn this into some personal vendetta." Personal. The word hit like a spark to dry grass. He'd blown off the most important day of my life, used my investment to fund his ego, and now I was the one overreacting. I told him the quiz would stay locked until he explained every missing dollar. He tried to talk over me, but I shut him down. "I'm not unlocking anything," I said, and ended the call before he could argue. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Ellen, my mom this time. Her voice was softer, pleading. "Honey, your brother's under a lot of pressure," she said, like I was the one causing it. "Just open the accounts and we'll sort this out." Frank chimed in from the background, his tone gruff. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I didn't respond. Their blind defense of Brandon was nothing new, but it still stung. I opened my laptop, diving back into the financial mess Taylor had flagged. The deeper I went, the uglier it got. Beyond the $25,000 Porsche and $12,000 in yacht gear, I spotted a new transfer, $15,000 to a Miami jeweler for a custom Rolex engraved with Brandon's initials. Another $8,000 went to a nightclub for event promotion, but the dates lined up with a party he'd bragged about throwing for his so-called high roller friends. My savings scraped together from years of coding through late nights were being burned on his fantasy of being a Miami elite. Each line in the ledger was a reminder of how little he valued me, how my parents had always let him slide. I needed hard proof to bury him. I called Morgan, his colleague, who'd already hinted at his shady moves. She picked up quickly, her voice hushed like she was avoiding eavesdroppers. "I've been waiting to hear from you," she said. She'd spent the night pulling files from the company's servers, things Brandon thought he'd covered up. Morgan sent me a zip file packed with evidence, fake vendor contracts for yacht rentals that never happened, invoices for consulting from companies that didn't exist, even an email chain where he lied to clients about landing a deal with a luxury cruise line. The total he'd siphoned off was pushing past $100,000, all while he fed me stories about growing the brand. Morgan wasn't done. She told me about a pitch meeting where Brandon showed up in designer clothes, tossing around promises of exclusive yacht events he couldn't deliver. "He's been telling investors we're close to a big contract," she said, "but it's all smoke. He's just stalling." She forwarded me his emails to clients full of fake partnerships and inflated numbers. Every document was another nail in his coffin. My stomach churned, not just from anger, but from the realization that he'd planned this, counting on my trust and my parents' bias to get away with it. I spent the day matching Morgan's files with Taylor's screenshots, building a case that was impossible to refute. My parents had always put Brandon on a pedestal, ignoring his screw-ups, while I quietly paid their way Ellen's car loan, Frank's overdue bills. I'd done it because I thought family stuck together, but they'd shown me I was just a means to an end, a wallet to prop up their golden boy. Now I was done playing that role. I wasn't ready to face Brandon yet. I needed everything locked down airtight. I asked Morgan to keep digging any client complaints, any shady texts, anything that could seal his fate. She agreed to send more by the week's end. In the meantime, I emailed the startup's investors, keeping my message short but serious. We need an urgent meeting to review the company's finances. Tomorrow work. They replied quickly, confirming a virtual call. The trap was set. Brandon thought he could keep his lies spinning, but I was about to unravel them in front of everyone who'd bought into his act. The virtual meeting with the investors started at 10 o'clock a.m., and I was ready. The investors, a group of 5 Miami entrepreneurs who'd backed his yacht event company, logged in one by one, their faces serious. I didn't waste time with small talk. We need to address a serious issue. I said, my voice steady but sharp. The company's funds have been misused, and I have proof. I shared my screen, walking them through the numbers. The $25,000 Porsche, the $12,000 yacht gear, the $15,000 Rolex, the $8,000 nightclub party, and $100,000 in total siphoned off through fake vendors and sham agencies. Gasps came through the speakers. One investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Carla, leaned closer to her camera. "This is fraud," she said, her tone icy. Brandon was on the call, his video off, but I could hear his breathing hitch. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Those expenses were for the business marketing networking." I didn't let him finish. I pulled up an email he'd sent to a client promising a partnership with a luxury cruise line that didn't exist. Then I showed the invoice for the Rolex engraved with his initials. The investors' faces hardened. Carla cut in. "You expect us to believe a custom watch was a business expense?" Brandon fumbled, his excuses falling apart. By the end of the hour, the investors were done with him. They voted to freeze all company operations and demanded an external audit. One, a real estate mogul, said he'd been close to signing a major contract for yacht events at a Miami resort. That deal was dead now, pulled the moment my evidence hit their inboxes. The fallout was immediate. Word spread fast in Miami's tight-knit business community. By noon, a local business blog had picked up the story naming Brandon as the face of a troubled startup caught in financial mismanagement. His name was trending for all the wrong reasons. I didn't stop there. I forwarded the audit decision to every client listed in the company's database, letting them know the truth about their visionary founder. Brandon's phone must have been blowing up, but he didn't call me. Instead, Grace, his wife, did. Her voice was shaky, not angry, but broken. "Is it true?" she asked. "Did he really steal from you? I didn't soften the blow." I sent her the same files I'd shown the investors. An hour later, she texted me. "I'm leaving him. I can't do this anymore." By evening, I heard from a mutual friend that Grace had packed a bag and moved to her sister's place, leaving Brandon alone in their condo. That wasn't the end of it. My cousin Kay, always quick to share family gossip, got wind of the story. She'd been out of the loop, but when I filled her in, she didn't hesitate. She posted a vague but pointed message in the family group chat. Some people think they can lie and get away with it, but the truth always comes out. She attached a link to the business blog, and the chat exploded. Aunts and uncles I hadn't spoken to in years started asking questions. "What did Brandon do?" one cousin demanded. Another sent a private message. "Did he really take your money?" Ellen tried to calm things down, typing, "This is a family matter. Let's handle it privately." But Kay wasn't having it. She replied, "Family doesn't steal from family." And the argument spilled into a flurry of messages, accusations flying between relatives who'd always tiptoed around Brandon's failures. Frank called me that night, his voice low and furious. "You're tearing this family apart," he said, as if I were the one who'd crossed the line. I didn't argue. I just said Brandon did that when he chose to steal from me. I hung up, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. The group chat kept buzzing, but I muted it. Kay texted me separately. "You did the right thing. They're just mad they got caught." Her words were a small comfort, but I wasn't looking for comfort. I wanted consequences. The next day I got an email from the resort that had pulled the contract. They wanted to meet with me, not Brandon, to discuss salvaging the company without him. I hadn't planned on stepping into his mess, but the invitation gave me an idea. If I could take control, I could redirect the company's remaining assets, every dollar Brandon hadn't already spent. I wasn't just exposing his lies. I was dismantling the life he'd built on my trust, and I wasn't done yet. The investor's decision to freeze the company's operations gave me the opening I needed. By the end of the week, I made my move. I contacted the bank and initiated the process to withdraw my entire investment from Brandon's yacht event company. Every dollar I'd poured in over 2 years, nearly $200,000. The paperwork was straightforward. As the primary investor, I had the right to pull out, especially with an audit looming. But I didn't just want my money back. I wanted to send a message. I directed half of the funds, $90,000, to a Miami-based charity focused on protecting the local coral reefs. It was a cause I'd always cared about, one Brandon had mocked as pointless, while he spent my savings on his Rolex and Porsche. The donation was public, announced on the charity's website with my name attached, not his. The irony wasn't lost on me. My money, which he'd treated as his personal slush fund, was now saving the ocean he'd exploited for his fake luxury brand. Brandon didn't take it well. I heard from Kay that he'd been forced to move out of his high-rise condo after Grace left him. With no job, no contract, and his reputation in tatters, he had nowhere to go but back to Frank and Ellen's modest house in a quieter part of Miami. Kaylee, always quick with updates, texted me a play-by-play. Brandon showed up with a single suitcase, his Porsche repossessed, after he missed payments. Ellen wasn't thrilled. She'd expected him to bounce back to pull off another one of his so-called brilliant plans. Instead, he was eating their groceries, leaving dishes in the sink, and dodging chores like he was still a teenager. Kay overheard Ellen complaining to a neighbor. He doesn't contribute a dime, just sits there moping about his company. The tension was thick, and it wasn't just about money. Frank, usually Brandon's biggest cheerleader, snapped at him for leaving the TV blaring all night. The house, once a haven for their golden boy, was turning into a pressure cooker. I stayed out of it, letting them stew in the mess Brandon had made. But Ellen didn't let it rest. A week after the donation hit the charity's website, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, her face a mix of exhaustion and desperation. "Kasha, we need to talk," she said, her voice softer than I'd expected. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, clutching her purse like a shield. "Your brother's struggling," she started, sitting on my couch. "He's lost everything, his home, his wife, his business. Can't you help him get back on his feet? Just a small loan, something to tide him over." Her eyes searched mine as if she could guilt me into forgetting what he'd done. "I didn't flinch, Ellen," I said, using her name deliberately. "He stole from me. He chose to lie, to spend my money on cars and parties while I was planning my wedding. Why should I fix his mistakes?" She bristled at my tone but didn't back down. "He's your brother," she said, her voice rising. "Family helps family no matter what. You pulling that money hurt him more than you know." I almost laughed. Hurt him? I'd been the one covering her car payments, Frank's credit card bills, even their utility costs when they fell behind. I'd done it without asking for a thank you, believing it was what family did. But they'd shown me family was a one-way street, Brandon's street. "He hurt himself," I said, my voice cold. "And you let him. You both chose him over me, even on my wedding day. I'm done bailing him out." Ellen's face tightened her lips, pressing into a thin line. She stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut, and I felt a weight lift. Kay texted me later that day. "Ellen's telling everyone you're selfish," she wrote, "but half the family is on your side." The group chat was still simmering with cousins debating whether Brandon had it coming. I didn't join in. I didn't need their approval. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Taylor. Her voice was urgent, almost disbelieving. "You need to see this," she said, forwarding me an email from a local bank manager she knew. It was a loan application, and my name was listed as a co-signer for a $50,000 loan to open a high-end yacht accessory store in Miami. The applicants, Frank and Ellen, they'd used my professional reputation, my years as a software developer with a clean financial record to back their pitch, claiming I'd agreed to support their new venture. They hadn't asked me, hadn't even mentioned it. The application included a forged digital signature. My name scrolled in a way I'd never sign. I felt a surge of anger, not just at their audacity, but at how low they'd stooped to prop up their crumbling world. I called the bank immediately, my voice calm but firm. "I didn't consent to this," I told the manager. "That signature isn't mine." She was apologetic, promising to flag the application as fraudulent and block it from moving forward. I asked Taylor to dig deeper to see if Frank and Ellen had tried this anywhere else. Within hours, she found another application at a different bank, this one for $30,000 again, listing me as a co-signer for the same yacht store idea. Taylor's contact confirmed they'd submitted it days after Brandon moved into their house, likely hoping to bankroll a new business to save him. I sent formal letters to both banks denying any involvement and requesting a fraud investigation. The applications were dead in the water, and I made sure Frank and Ellen knew it. I emailed them a curt message: I know about the loan attempts. They've been stopped. Don't try this again. The fallout hit Brandon hardest. The fraud investigations into the loan applications triggered a deeper look into his financial dealings with the yacht event company. Morgan, his former colleague, had quietly tipped off a regulatory agency about his fake contracts and inflated client promises. By the end of the month, Brandon was under formal investigation for financial fraud. A local news outlet caught wind publishing a story about a Miami entrepreneur facing scrutiny for misusing investor funds. They didn't name him outright, but anyone in the know could connect the dots. His name, already tarnished from the business blog, became poison in Miami's entrepreneurial circles. Clients he'd once wined and dined stopped returning his calls. A former partner posted on LinkedIn calling him out for unethical practices without mincing words. Brandon's dream of being a Miami big shot was crumbling faster than he could keep up. The family's reputation took a nosedive. Kay texted me updates from the family group chat, which had turned into a battleground. Cousins who'd once stayed neutral were now openly criticizing Frank and Ellen for enabling Brandon. One uncle posted they should have reined him in years ago. A family friend, someone Ellen used to play cards with, unfollowed her on social media after the news broke. Neighbors in their quiet Miami suburb started whispering Kay overheard them at a grocery store, speculating about that family with the shady son. Ellen tried to salvage things, hosting a small barbecue to clear the air, but only a handful of relatives showed up, and the mood was tense. Frank, usually quick to defend, Brandon stayed silent, his face set in a grim line as he flipped burgers. The family name, once respected in their tight-knit community, was now a source of gossip and side eyes. I didn't need to push harder. The damage was done. But I wasn't passive. I reached out to the charity I donated to, ensuring the $90,000 contribution was tied to a public campaign. They launched a press release praising my generous support for Miami's coral reefs, which got picked up by a local environmental blog. The contrast was stark. My name tied to something positive, theirs dragged through the mud. Frank sent me a text, his first in weeks. "You're destroying us." I didn't reply. He and Ellen had made their choice when they tried to use my name without asking, just as they'd chosen Brandon over me on my wedding day. Their desperation only confirmed what I already knew. They'd never seen me as more than a means to an end. 3 months after the fraud investigations began, the final pieces of my family's world fell apart. Frank and Ellen's house, the one I'd helped keep afloat with years of quiet payments, went into foreclosure. They'd missed too many mortgage payments, their savings drained by legal fees and Brandon's endless debts. By spring, they were forced to sell, moving into a cramped rental apartment in a run-down part of Miami's outskirts. Kay sent me a photo of their new place, a faded building with peeling paint, a far cry from their old suburban home. Inside, she said, the tension was unbearable. Brandon, now officially bankrupt, had nowhere else to go. His yacht event company was dissolved, its assets seized to cover unpaid vendors. Grace's divorce was finalized, her name legally untangled from his, leaving him with nothing but a single room in Frank and Ellen's new apartment. The family that had once toasted to perfect days on a Miami beach was now confined to a space barely big enough for their regrets. I didn't reach out. There was no point. Frank sent me a single text, short and bitter. "You got what you wanted." Ellen tried one last call, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and despair. "We're struggling, Kasha," she said. "Can't you see what this is doing to us?" I let the call go to voicemail. I'd heard their excuses before on my wedding day, when they chose Brandon's company over mine, when they defended his lies, when they tried to use my name to borrow money. Each time they'd shown me exactly who they valued. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. Kay kept me updated, though I didn't ask for it. She said Brandon barely left his room scrolling through job boards, but too ashamed to face the Miami business scene that had blacklisted him. His bankruptcy filing was public, splashed across court records that anyone could find online. Former clients and investors had cut all ties, and even his old frat buddies stopped inviting him to their parties. Frank took a part-time job as a security guard. His pride swallowed as he worked long shifts for minimum wage. Ellen picked up extra hours at a discount store. Her days spent ringing up customers, while dodging questions from old friends who'd heard about their fall. The family group chat, once buzzing with plans and gossip, went silent. No one posted about barbecues or holidays anymore. It was as if they'd erased themselves from each other's lives. Dylan and I, meanwhile, were building something new. We'd moved into a condo overlooking Miami's skyline, a place that felt like a fresh start. One evening, as we sat on the balcony with glasses of wine, my phone buzzed with a notification from the Coral Reef Charity. They'd named a conservation project after my donation, a small gesture that meant more to me than any family gathering ever had. I thought about the years I'd spent propping up Frank, Ellen, and Brandon, paying their bills, funding his schemes, believing I was holding us together. All I'd done was enable their selfishness, letting them take me for granted while they chased their own agendas. I didn't feel joy watching them crumble. It wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about clarity. Selfish actions have consequences you can't outrun, and I'd made sure they faced theirs. Brandon's bankruptcy, Grace's divorce, Frank and Ellen's lost home. It was the natural fallout of their choices, not mine. I'd given them everything from money to trust, and they'd thrown it away for a day on the beach and a string of lies. Long-to self-respect was the only thing I needed to keep. It was the one thing they couldn't take from me, no matter how hard they tried. As I looked out over the city lights, Dylan reached for my hand. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations. The silence from my family wasn't painful. It was freeing. They'd shown me who they were, and I'd shown them who I could be without them. There was no going back, no need to reconcile. The lesson was clear. Selfish actions lead to consequences you can't escape.